Welcome back, my name's Steve and thank you for joining me on my photography journey. Today I am answering a question that I've been asked a couple of times. Can you edit photos in DaVinci Resolve? And the answer is yes, so let's have a look at that now. So what I'm going to do is open up DaVinci Resolve and we are going to import some photos and have a look at what we can do in terms of editing to get it looking as good as possible. And with this we get to use tools like Dehancer, which I've talked about before for video editing, but we can now include for photo editing as well. So I've just created a project in DaVinci Resolve. If you would like to know more about kind of that basic side of things, let me know and I can do more tutorials on DaVinci Resolve. But here we go. We have got three pictures here. Well, I say three pictures. We have got three different files of the same picture. So we've got a DNG, a JPEG and a NEF, which is the Nikon RAW format. And as you can see, the colors in the RAW one aren't coming out very well. So we can try and change that and see what we can do with it. But I think it's something to do with the way that the Nikon RAW file is processed within DaVinci Resolve that doesn't really work well with what we want. So I'm going to avoid using that one today. I'm going to start off with this DNG. So it's still a RAW type file. There's still a lot of information in there, but this is kind of a digital negative file. So it's less processed than the JPEG, but is a slightly different format to the original RAW format. So let's start off with this one. And then the way that DaVinci Resolve works in the color management, we have got these things called nodes. And rather than like a layer in Photoshop, you have got nodes here, which you can build up. So you put something on this one and it does something to the image. The next one along takes the information from that first node and applies something new to it. So you can build things up, again, kind of like in layers in Photoshop, but it's more of a linear thing. You can have things in parallel. It can get very complicated very quickly. But what we want to do is keep it nice and straightforward. So you get a single node to begin with, and then you can name that. So I'm just going to right click on it and then go to node label, and let's call this exposure. And then I'm going to use some of the tools built into DaVinci Resolve to control the exposure of this image. We can look at the image itself, but then down at the bottom, we also have these things called scopes, which, let me pop that out. You've got 4 different ones, and this can allow you to look at things in a different way. So at the moment, we've got 2 waveforms, a parade and a vectorscope. What I like to do is change this one to another vectorscope, but have it zoomed in ×2. Actually, that one's zoomed in ×2, so let's take that one back to normal. And then we've got a line here, which should be kind of skin color. And that's on both of them. So remember, this one is a 1x zoom, this is a 2x zoom. And then we've got our parade, so our red, green and blue channels. And then we've got an overall waveform, so this is the overall image. So we can see we've got darker colors down at either side, and in the middle we've got some lighter colors, which is me basically. Either side we've got some lighter colors up here, which is kind of the pictures in the background and things. So that's the basics of how the waveform works. So what we want to do, let me move this back down here, is adjust our exposure. Down at the bottom here, we've got various tools. So in here, this is our primaries, and we'd like it to be on the wheels. So lift, gamma, gain, shadows, kind of mid-range, and then highlights, and then offset is our entire image. So let's just change our exposure. Let's make it brighter. There we go. You can see that the exposure has increased on the image, and you can see that both of our parade and waveform have also risen up as well. So you've got lighter colors at the top, darker colors at the bottom, and that looks terrible. So let's go back down a bit with that one. And let's just brighten it up just a little bit. There we go. So let's add a bit of saturation to this. So we can add another node on here. So Option S on a Mac or Control S on a Windows computer. And then we can again label this one as contrast, let's say. And then what we can do with our contrast is we can play around with our highlights. So we can lift the highlights up a little bit and then bring down the rest of the image. Bring up our highlights, bring down the rest of the image. So we're just kind of playing around with it a bit to see what it looks like. And then what you can also do over here, you can see on this particular node, there's editing using the primaries. This is node 2 and it's our contrast. But what you can also do is click on here to disable the node. So that turns everything off from that node and turns it back on. So you can compare the before and the after to see what you've done and whether it's made a difference or not. And that looks a little bit better. So what I'm going to do now is add in Dehancer. Now Dehancer is an effect. Let me just move this out of the way. So let me scroll down here. It's all the way down at the bottom under Film Emulation. So Dehancer Pro, let me just drag and drop that onto that node. And you'll see it already makes a difference to the image. So what we can do is we can scroll all the way back to the bottom and disable all tools. That kind of turns everything off within that node. And then it's ours to play around with and see what we want. So you remember I've done this on video before. I've shown you through the Dehancer plugin and what we are doing with it and how we adjust different bits and pieces. So it's exactly the same here. We can adjust the original image. So if we didn't want to play with our exposure on a separate node, we could do it here. Again, double click anything to reset it. We can change our temperature, our tint, and things like that up there. But I'm going to leave that all for the moment. And then we can go into our film profile. So we can enable that if we wanted to and change different versions of it. So let's go for this one. Again, it's just a case of having a play around with it and seeing what you can do with it in order to get it looking how you want it to look. I quite like the look of that, so I'll leave that one on. And then we've got all of these different options so that we can go through and edit them as much as we want. We can enable and disable and have a look at the image, having a look at our scopes to see what effect it has. So with that one, very minimal effect. Film compression, on the other hand, does give us a bit more of an effect, particularly on the scopes. And it actually makes the colour of my head look a little bit better. And if you want to change any of these, you can change the white point. Double click to reset it. And there's so many different options that you can have a play around with in here. And then we can have our different print. So let's say we are printing on something glossy. And we can turn that one on. And that's how it looks. Turn it off. So again, as you go through everything, try it and see, does it make it better or does it make it worse? And then you can change these different sliders to see what effect that has on the image and get it looking just how you want it to look. So you can have less contrast, more contrast, exactly how you like it. So you can pull back the saturations a bit. And then just you've got lots of different options for playing with it. And like I said, just getting it looking how you want it to look helps if you press enable. And then you can adjust these all together, changing the tone completely, reset those. Or if you want to, you can just affect one channel. So you can see on the parade now that our red channel is increasing, whereas the blue and the green are decreasing to compensate. And you can change, you can cool down the shadows, you can warm up the midtones, and just play around with that image however you want it to look. We can add some film grain if we want. We can dial that back so it's not quite so apparent. Kind of go for 5. So you can see a slight difference with that. Right, looks quite nice. And then for our halation and bloom, let's look at this lamp here where you can see kind of that glow around the outside of it and see how that is affected with halation and with bloom. You can see particularly with bloom that increased significantly, so we can go off and on. And remember to look at the rest of the image as well. It looks slightly better like that, but we can dial it down. It doesn't have to be all the way. So let's go in here somewhere. And same with the halation. Actually adds a better colour to the side of my face there. And we've got all these different options, so we can add film damage to it if we want and increase that. We can change the type of film so you can see these lines appearing in it. Not a big fan of that, so I'm going to turn that one off. This just gives you an idea of what you can do with DaVinci Resolve in terms of photo editing as well. And even if you don't have Dehancer, it still works really well. So again, we've got another picture here, and this is one of the limitations of it. DaVinci Resolve is for video primarily. A photo is obviously a single frame of a video, so it does still work, but this should be vertical, and it's not. So what we need to do is come back to our actual timeline. Let's move these out of the way for the moment. And we've got our frame there, so we can rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. And we can change our zoom so it actually fits on. So I have it set to red in the background to show me where there's not a part of my image. You can have it black, grey, that kind of thing. It's up to you. But if we go back to our colour space now, then we're back to a black background and our picture is now the right way up. So let me just close these clips so that they give us a little bit more space. And then let's do it without the effects here. So let's just use DaVinci Resolve. So similar kind of thing as before. Let's have our scopes there so that we can see it. We have got a much narrower band on all of these because it is looking at that whole image, so it's including these black areas as well. So that's why it looks like that. So let's have a look at our exposure first of all. Let's increase it slightly. And we could add another node here so we can adjust our color, so our kind of balance for it. So just trying to get it the tones right, and we're just moving this ball in the center just very slightly so we can bring it all the way warm, kind of green, blues, but let's go slightly warmer with it. There we go. Option S to give us another node. So like you can see, we can build up as many as you like on here and do as much as we want. So let's do some contrast, let's say. So let's brighten it up a bit. That's increasing the highlights, and then we can bring down the kind of the overall look. So we are stretching the highlights up and then pulling everything else back down. And as you can see on here, our the width of the waveform is increasing, which means that there's more contrast. There's more bits at the top, more bits at the bottom. That's giving you more contrast. So again, we can stretch it up and then pull it down a bit and kind of get it how we want it to look on there. Now let's change some saturation. So let's go into our HDR tool here, and along the bottom we've got more options for different areas of the image basically, but global. is our global one. So we can increase our global saturation. Kind of where do we want it? That looks good. And then on here, we can always zoom in as well and see how things are looking. So we've got some nice purple bits in here. So maybe we want to do something with those purple colors on their own. Z will take us back to our kind of zoomed 100% size. So we'll come across to here. Let's add something with some different colors. So we have different tools. We don't have to just use these basic color wheels in here. We've got lots of other tools. So let's have a look at this one, which is the color warper. And this will allow us to adjust kind of specific colors. Let me move that out of the way again. And what I prefer is this kind of hue saturation color warper. So we can pick a color in here. So what do we want? We want this kind of pinky purple, I think. So let's select that. That shows us where it is on there. And then we can move it. We can change selectively how different areas are looking. Again, not double click on this one. We've got a reset up here. So if we wanted our greens, for example, let's choose our greens. So that's a point down here. So what we can also do is choose a particular color on here. So let's go for this green. So just check where we are on there. There we go. So that puts a little dot on here, and we have auto lock on for 3 points. So if we move this, it selectively moves just that area rather than the whole color grid as it did just now. So you can selectively adjust those colors. We can make them more green. There we go. So again, as with all of these different tools, you can turn it off and back on, and you can see in this section here particularly, you can see how we have adjusted our colors. So this kind of pinky purple color, you can see where it's coming up on here. So actually let's go for a color up there. Let's have back to our 3 points. And you can see how you affect just that particular area. So you can kind of, that's back to normal, just make it a bit more purple. And Z to zoom back out, and it's only affected those bits. So if we come in here, and you can see it's affecting these areas in here. Off and then on. So there's lots of different options that you've got when you're editing pictures in DaVinci Resolve. What you then want to do is export it. So that is within our deliver page, which is over here, this little rocket. So we come into here, and then this is where we choose what we want to do and how we want to output our image. We can choose to send it out as a JPEG, and it gives you different options of the color space. You can choose the resolution that you want to export it as, and we can choose our frame rate. Is obviously just going to be timeline frame rate, our best quality. And we can add it to our render queue and choose where we want it to go. So let's put it on my desktop. Oops, move that out of the way. So it's on here, and then we can render that one out. It shouldn't take too long to do. And you can see it's completed. Right click on there, and we can reveal in Finder and have a look. And then this is the other one. And you can see our slightly brighter purples in there. So this is the way to kind of edit photos in here. It takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not as straightforward as doing it on something like Lightroom, but so the main thing is you can use your plugins that you've bought for DaVinci Resolve. So if you've bought Dehancer Pro or any of the Dehancer packages, then you can use that to edit your photos. You don't need to buy the separate photo editing one. You can do it all in here, and that way it allows you to use those extra tools that you might not otherwise have access to add a little something extra to your pictures. You can always do most of the editing in Lightroom or something that you're familiar with, and then just do the last tweaking once you come into DaVinci Resolve. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what you can do. I can definitely go into more specifics on each of the different tools or anything like that, so just let me know if that's something that you'd like. But other than that, I do hope you learned something today. If you want to pick up the Dehancer plugin, there's still a link that will give you 10% off if you use the code Creative Fields. But if you don't want to, DaVinci Resolve is absolutely fine, and the free version does, I think, 99% of what I've showed you today. So it's a free photo editor, basically. Thank you for joining me. Have a great week, and I will see you again next time on my photography journey. Bye.